Well, then you're in for a fucking treat, bitch. All right, that's enough of that. I got my friend's mic over here. I got John's mic. And I was using that shit with the voice changer because obviously I don't know if you actually it's not really obvious, but it could be insinuated that he's having mic issues or audio issues with his mic. Blah 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 blah. And so he brought it over here to me to see if I can do anything. Turns out, nothing wrong with it. Just nothing wrong with it. Anyway, welcome back. Welcome back to another stream of. You already know. It's in the title. If you can't read, what the fuck is wrong with you? Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot. Oh, shit. Oh, no. Your version of Streamlabs OBS is not supported. Please update to the latest version. But my my Streamlabs is literally the fucking latest version, though. Uh-oh. Well, I'm gonna hope that it still works. Okay. I don't know if it worked, but I hope it did. You know, why would they have something that is meant to be integrated with Streamlabs and OBS if, you know, they're not working together on it while they're making updates and shit? So hopefully game audio will be there, you know? In the meantime, I will put this little doodad. Hey, Simon. When the VOD goes up, you might want to check it out. I was singing. So remember, when the VOD goes up, you might want to watch once the stream is over. All right. I've been only streaming for 420, so it's not that long. Anyway, you can hear me, right? You can hear the game. It should still be raining. Yeah, it's still raining. Why? What do you mean why? Because I was singing. You don't want to hear me sing? That's kind of mean. Anyway, left off at Gothic architecture, I'm pretty sure. I literally just got rid of the star right there. I don't remember, but if I finish this, but here we go. Gothic architecture, filing into the content of the stream. The early Gothic buildings in Bohemia drew inspiration from France and the Rhineland. Among the earliest were the monastery in Pasta by Tizzyboy, South Moravia, the chapter house of Osek, North Bohemia, the monastery of St. Agnes in Prague, and many parish churches and monasteries, such as those in Kolin and Korim in central Bohemia. Thank you for the subscriblies. I appreciate that. And your around 1300, Czech architecture diverged from its Western counterparts. There was a burgeoning, I don't know, of Cistercian monasteries. For example, in Zlata Koruna, Vichy, I don't know how to say that. Vichy? In South Bohemia, and churches and castles, for example, Bezdiz, North Bohemia. The High Gothic period was in full swing during the time of Charles IV and Wenceslas IV. What the fuck are you reading about Gothic architecture? Nerd, fucking nerd, Gothic nerd. Hey, listen. Hey, Emperor of Mankind. Actually, you know what? Nah, never mind. Yeah, you get. Nobody ever got to see something at the start of the stream. Yeah, you guys will never know. Gothic architecture is basically the tall, pointy spires and pointed arches in the window. Okay. The High Gothic period was in full swing during the time of Charles IV and Wenceslas IV, with its rectangular windows and portals, rayonnant traceries, and quadripartite, or sexpartite, or cross-ribbed, vaulting. The most significant buildings of that time are University of Prague, St. Vitus Cathedral, Charles Bridge, Prague Old Town Hall, a new town hall, stone houses in Prague, the castles in Karlstein, Kust, and Geisberg. We find the first records of construction works fellowships. The most famous are those of Master Peter Parler and his family, the Parkers, who really loved pizza. Nobody knew what pizza was, though, back then, but they originally made it. Can I check the VOD, though? I don't know. Sure, you can check the VOD. Obviously, after the stream is over, but I have a shit ton to read. I'm feeling awake right now, so hopefully I can, like, get through all of the ready bits in one go. Where was I? Oh, yeah. The most famous are those of Master Peter Parler and his family, and Matthias and Aris, who also worked on reconstruction of Sasso Monastery. New castles no longer served just a defensive function, but were also intended to serve as sovereign residences. They were therefore more spacious and elaborate and had extensive gardens. Would you prefer to read without me talking or with me talking? I don't care. I don't have a problem either way. Greetings! The basic form of greeting was bowing, with numerous variations depending on the occasion and the mutual status of the participant. A light bow with the hand on the heart would befit two noblemen of equal rank. A deeper bow was a more respectful greeting, to a guest or someone of higher standing. The next level was to kneel on the left knee and bow the head in deference to rulers, barons or high-ranking commanders, and it expressed allegiance. The person would have to remain in this position until invited by the superior to rise. The more subordinate level was to bow while down on both knees, an expression of complete subjugation, often combined with a plea, typically for mercy. Gothic architecture came out about 100 years before Gothic armoire styles, if you are curious. Your bones are always wet. Think about that. Well, wet bones make me feel uncomfy. Delicious bone marrow. It's like getting a coconut. You crack it open and then you just... Doffing headwear was a practice that came in with Burgundian fashion. In the 15th century, loyalty was expressed by kissing the rings of magnates and prelates. It was not proper to kiss the hands of ladies, but they were given a deeper bow than their social rank alone would elicit. Particular forms of salutation was also applied when addressing a certain person. For example, in writing, a townsman was to be addressed as honest, and a baronet as esteemed, and a titular lord as highborn. That's why animals chew bones. Marrow is very nutritious. It is. It's the best part. It's too bad that I can't find anything with actual marrow in it. Chickens have like their tiny ass fucking bones. It's not enough. I need more. I need more. No, Doc, no. In the countryside, people greeted each other according to their nature, often mentioning in the greeting wishes of good health, prosperity, and God's blessing, or making reference to Christian tradition. God bless, Christ be praised, etc. Guilds and crafts. Medieval town society was made up largely of craftsmen and merchants who ensured its socio-economic growth. Based on their freeman rights, they could exercise their craft and had the right to market. In addition to privileges such as the protection and support for the town's operation, healthcare, and food provision, it was their duty to pay taxes on every sale or transport of goods outside the town limits. In essence, the status of the municipality was dependent on them. Hence, it was important that they did not relocate and ply their trade elsewhere, passing their occupation on to following generations. Wouldn't it be funny if I redeemed it while you are fighting the final boss? No. Go fuck yourself. Technically, there is no final boss. Yeah. Technically, there is a final boss because it's the next game where the final boss shows up. In the space of 1 century, several craftsmen of the same profession would be active in a town. These artisans gradually began to form themselves into groups, with political and economic rules, or members' guilds. They had their seals of office and pennants bearing the guild crest granted by the monarch. Each member of the guild had the support of the others, and they all agreed on prices and the regulation of sales, and the rules for apprenticeship and discharging their duties. No one without guild membership could trade in goods. You're fucking retarded, okay? Healing herbs. Herbs play an important role, not only in medieval cuisine, but also as the foundation of the healing arts. Knowledge about herbs was disseminated by either by word of mouth between herb women in the country, or between monks and scholars via ancient scripts. Ew. Yeah, I don't... Stop. Docky, you're not allowed to permit that term. Nothing explicit. It's in the chat rules. Stop it. Gross. Many herbs can be taken in the form of teas, concoctions by prolonged cooking, infusions in scalding water, and as extracts, macerated, tinctures, alcohol leached, or steeped in vinegar, juices, or concentrates for gargling. Adding honey or sugar did nothing for the efficacy of herbal slaves, but it did help the medicine go down better. In addition to ingestion, herbs were applied in the form of creams, ointments, poultices, or oils, emulsified and diluted in water. No, you're not explicit, you're subtle. No, it's not. It has undertones. It's not completely explicit. There is a difference, Doc. Do you not know the definition of explicit? Now I have to go and fucking do this shit. 'Cause you're fucking... See, that's fine. I don't care about that. It has undertones and it's retarded. It's funny, Emperor. I don't appreciate anything explicit, though. It's stupid, but it works. All right, here we go. Explicit. A fully revealed or expressed without vagueness, implication, or ambiguity, leaving no question as to the meaning or intent. See, that that the opposite of that is fine. I don't respect it. In certain cases, the advice was to sleep on cushions filled with dried plants. It was believed, especially in rural areas, that the properties of the herbs were affected by the particulars of when and how they were gathered. For example, on Midsummer Night, at midnight, etc., accompanied by special formulaic incantations or enchantments. No, I don't. What do you mean? You think I have respect for myself? Heraldry. Heraldry is the doctrine of characters and symbols depicted on coats of arms, governed by fixed rules, and the relevant know-how was privy to nobles and knights. It was a necessity, because Europe of the time had so many noble families, they simply could not be memorized. By applying heraldic symbolism and rules, however, the wearer and his dynasty could be identified from his battle pennants and coat of arms. Simplified heraldic symbolism was also used on the arms and equipment of urban militias and the attire of soldiers of a feudal lord. Yep. I don't respect whores or myself. I can act respectful. I can be respectful, but I don't have respect. Hospitals and almshouses. Since ancient times, there were people studying medicine and trying to provide assistance to their fellows in the fight against disease and pain. The oldest medical practices have been preserved as documents in monasteries, which were the earliest centers of medieval medicine. The Benedictines were the foremost healing-oriented order. Unlike the town physicians, they provide care free of charge. In the 11th century, hospitals underwent noticeable development, particularly thanks to the knightly orders devoted to charity, and the buildings of hospitals and hospices for pilgrims. Care for the sick was entrusted exclusively to men. Women and nuns were forbidden from helping out in the infirmaries by the church council. The treatment of wounds mostly consisted of disinfection by means of a hot iron, flushing with water, or applying various ointments and balms. Bandages were of linen or canvas cloth. Open wounds and inflammations were treated with herbal poultices. Soldiers often had to be able to help themselves because the field ambulances were unable to follow on behind the military encampments fast enough. The wounded frequently failed to survive being carted around for several days in open wagons. Houses and dwellings. Yeah, the, the, the church was a little bit 60s. Houses and dwellings. The core of the medieval house, whether in a village or town, consisted of a kitchen, a hall, and living room, hearthroom. All were on the ground floor. From the 15th century onwards, upper stories started to be added. The walls were insulated from the outside with clay daub, which also gave the house some fire protection. Windows were kept very small to save heat. The grounds of the house were usually fenced in, and the courtyard had gates broad enough to admit a covered wagon. Attached to houses were utility buildings, barns, stables, outhouses, forges, and woodsheds or food granaries. Waste was taken outside the house into the fields, or disposed of in cesspits. Gross. Outside the house would be toilets built over sewage pits. That's where you live, Docky. A typical village house was single-story, with the front door leading in from the courtyard into a central space. I think that's supposed to be off which was a living room and chamber. The houses were built of wood or on stone foundations. The jizba, or main room of village households, constituted the living place and kitchen, with an oven and a hearth. Above the hearth was a smoke hole to the roof space. Other areas served as stores for cereals, tools, food in jars or chests, etc. Lighting was provided by torches, candles and pottery, candlesticks, and most of all by firelight from the hearth. The floor was compacted clay mixed with straw. Leaves, or animal hair. The roof was typically thatched, sheafs of rye or reed straw, often doubled. In front of the house was a garden and a courtyard with farm buildings for poultry, pigs, and cattle. That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen. Hunting was always a source of meat and furs, mainly for the lesser nobility. For the aristocracy, courtly hunting was more for enjoyment, being much cheaper entertainment than tournaments, while providing similar thrills. Hunting became a favorite pastime, and chasing game with dogs became almost a ritual. Hunting weapons were similar to those used in battle. Bows, crossbows, spears, daggers, and dogs were used to track and chase down game until the exhausted animal stood its ground in last defense. Then came the moment for the hunters, up till then only following the sound of the baying hounds, to down the animal with an arrow or spear. Finishing off on the ground was done with a sword or dagger. Ah! I don't live in a sewage patch, I'm a powerful among creatures. I'm talking to big story people who the place if I'm such deal. I have over 300 confirmed kills and I'll carry you fucking dead kid. Wall of text, wall of text, wall of text, wall of text. Falconry. Hunting with a falcon originated in the Orient, and other specifically trained raptors, goshawks, and sparrowhawks were more of a fashion, a pursuit for both men and women. The poorer classes were not allowed to hunt in the forests, subject to strict penalties, with the exception of hare hunting. Man, if I could have like a raven, if I could train like a raven in falconry, that'd be so cool. English, motherfucker, do you speak it? Mop the fucker. You fool. Yep. Hygiene. From the 13th century on, waste was dumped behind the house or buried in pits. Toilets consisted of cesspits topped with a wooden superstructure with a seat or just a board. There were water drainage systems and no lack of free-standing latrines or outhouses, or at castles' privies. It was not uncommon for a latrine to be shared between several dwellings. In the inhospitable and badly heated castles, there were sometimes bathrooms with bathtubs or even plunge pools. Swimming was attractive not just as a means of cleansing the body, but also for pleasure. In private houses, a bathroom was a sign of luxury and high status. This did not mean that wealthier residents washed more often, just that they were more readily able to put on clean clothes. The most common acts of hygiene included hand washing, even the poorest homes affording a basin with a water pitcher or a suspended water cistern with a faucet. The cleanest people were villagers, who would often wash in the stables or the river. Gross. Oh, you want the fuck I didn't stop my poor spelling skills. I'll let you deal with that, Doc. Do as you see fit with that one. Bury your shit, you filthy slut. Ew, gross. The Inquisition! I did not expect this. The Inquisition was founded in the 12th century primarily as a reaction to the widespread Albigensian Catharist heretical movement. Although it was originally intended to serve as an instrument for disciplining the clergy, later, after the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, its main mission was to combat heresy. The Papal Inquisition in the the 1, 2, 3s and was directly subordinated to the Pope and thus became more or less a separate power, because it was answerable only to itself and the Pope. Rivers were pretty clean back then if you washed the river head. My God, poor Emperor getting caught by autofilter. Uh-oh. No, do not allow that word. The B word is evil. I know. I don't. Purge. Gross. The Inquisition's main tasks were to seek out heretics, interrogate them, and convict them or redeem them, and to deliver the unredeemed to secular power for punishment. The term Inquisition was derived from the Latin inquisito, inquisitio, to investigate or inquire. Cat! When an inquisitor arrived in a diocese, he would usually report to the bishop and subsequently serve a solemn mass and make a sermon. He would then hear reports from the people about heresy. Heretics were allowed a period of grace, usually 10 to 30 days, in which they could give themselves up and beg forgiveness. The inquisitor would then assess the reports he had received and convene the actual retrials, which would either confirm or overturn the accusations. Wisconsin. Invective. Although the more educated or higher-born tried to keep invective and vulgarities out of their speech, swearing has been a part of the vernacular since time immemorial. Profanity was not only verbal, but often appeared in written form in documents that sought to defame and humiliate those addressed. Some of the slurs arose by corrupting foreign language expressions. Others were derived from animals and their attributes. Often used as insults were onomatopoeic words, articulated noises, or metaphors. Words derived from adjectives, attitudes towards work, criminal offenses, political stances, professions, psychological malaise, or people's names. The worst kind of insult questioned the honor of the individual. Such swear words quite often led to court cases or duels. It was common practice that anyone not prepared to defend their honor would indeed lose it in the eyes of those around. Tacos. Curva do pichi. I don't know. Tacos are okay. Curva. Why was that not permitted? Jews. Oh. The Jews settled in Moravia and Bohemia probably even earlier than the 10th century. Initially, they were considered foreigners who the Romans had banished into exile. Jewish traders in the Czech lands settled largely around the long-distance trade routes in major centers, which in the early Middle Ages were in the center Elbe and Werens. Most lived in Prague, however. Records tell of about 120 houses in the Jewish quarter of the Old Town. They were under the legal protection of decrees by Wenceslaus II and subsequently Charles IV. Over the centuries, however, the flourishing of their activities as merchants and financiers gave rise to protests from many elements of society, in particular the Catholic Church. The Jews had indeed imported valuable gold and used it to barter for horses, furs, or slaves. Their rights became progressively circumscribed. They could not buy land or houses, had to lived in specially designed ghettos, were allowed to lend money and at interest, and to trade only where they were not in competition with locals, and were prohibited from working as craftsmen or farmers. The segregation of Jews was also underlined by enforced labeling. They had to wear, for example, a yellow circle or a yellow ribbon on their garments, or a specifically shaped hat. The women had to have a yellow ribbon in their hair, and the men mandatory beards. No help came from the church, which traditionally laid the blame on them for being the killers of Christ, and for adhering to pagan rituals. Russian blah 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 pronunciation blah blah blah. The Russian Federation blah 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 is a transcontinental country spanning Eastern Europe. Thank you. Really appreciate all that information that I'm not interested in. In the Middle Ages, the Jews were considered the king's own, and under his protection, so that if the townspeople were inclined to commit a pogrom to set fire to the quarter and massacre the inhabitants, they would have to pay the king hefty reparations. Some kings looked forward to such pogroms as a good source of income. Others protected their Jews. For example, Wenceslaus IV granted the Prague Jews the right to their own town within Prague, with its own wall and 6 gates. But even this failed to protect them from the pogrom in 1389, when the king was traveling abroad. After his return, he levied the ultimate punishment on the organizers of the pogrom, which quelled further attacks for some time, though they made a comeback with the Hussite movement. Bip. Bip. Kitchens. Medieval kitchens differed in the countryside, the city, and at court. Brain. Hold on. I can fix this. Yeah. Medieval kitchens differed in the countryside, the city, and at court. In earlier times, everything was cooked outdoors, while later, at the time of our narrative, the stove hearths were built, which served for heating the home as well as cooking. Some kitchens had an open fireplace indoors, with the smoke drawn off by small windows and fume hoods. When we speak of the so-called smoke kitchens, or black kitchen, this was largely a feature of taverns, mills, presbyteries, and manors, which go its name from the smoke-blackened walls around it. Oh God, is this a lore-reading stream? Oh, I can't believe it. It's insane. I've been here for 37 minutes and I haven't figured it out. Holy shit. Yes, it's a lore reading stream. I've been saying over and over again while I've been streaming this game that I will be doing a lore reading stream once I finally finish it. I will read all the lore that I have collected personally, and then that's it. And then I delete the game, and then I have more storage space for other games. But yeah, this is a lore reading stream, in case you couldn't read the title. Just like last stream was a lore reading stream. You were there. Come on. Come on. The game is being deleted. Well, I mean, yeah, what else am I going to do with it? Of course, I love a lot of games. I'm not just going to stick to one game, though. I don't just play one game over and over again for the rest of my entire life. Just like life, there's always an end, and then you move on. Move on to the next. Knighthood training. The physical training of a boy to become a knight began before he was 7 years old. He had to know how to run, jump, and climb well, and also to be able to swim. He strengthened his arms by throwing hefty rocks. Over the years, boys had to become proficient in spear throwing, archery, unarmed wrestling, horsemanship, pairing with a shield, and attacking. Their training also encompassed joining the hunt. The 7 knightly skills, according to the classical tradition, were horse riding, swimming, archery, fighting with the sword, and unarmed hunting, as well as playing chess and composing poetry. Gee. If you delete this game, I will jam Sir Radzig's sword up your bum so hard. Well, you know the game that I bought you that you completed once, then left alone? Which one? Of course, Emperor. Did you not think that I was going to move on to another game? I still have it installed. Shut up. I don't want to miss out on other experiences from other games. And besides, I don't want to ruin the memories that I've made from this game. I would prefer to just have my playthrough the way I wanted it to go, and once the game is over, there it is. I saw that, Doc. Why am I not able to swim in this game? Ah! Oh my. Why couldn't I throw rocks? I want to throw hefty rocks. Similarly, burghers practiced combat with different types of weapons, which came into its own, especially in town defense. The towns more than anywhere else spawned sword fighting and archery fellowships, where swordplay would be taught. Initially, according to the so-called German school, Dutch Fitch School, later in the Renaissance, dominated by the Italian and Spanish schools. Shooting fellowships were devoted to archery with bows and crossbows, and with the development of gunpowder, firearms came to play. I want gunpowder firearms. Fuck the bow. Fuck the fucking bow. I want a crossbow or gunpowder firearms. With a river only waist deep. Bitch, fucking pull up your damn fucking feet and just start floating. Learn to float at least. Can I please just float my way across the river? I will float on my back just to fucking go across the river. Don't worry about it. Plague, I wasn't saying anything to you. Other than I saw what you did. And why can't I have a rapier? I want a rapier. God, it would be so cool to just fucking stab people under their armor and just shove that shit right in there. Guns and gunpowder wouldn't hit Bohemian numbers until about 20 years later after this game. Yeah, but it could still be imported. They knew about it. They knew about gunpowder over there. They knew it existed. That's what you sound like. That's what you fucking sound like. They have some shit that's based off of in the 15th century. If they have 15th century based shit, shouldn't there be rapiers? Rapiers showed up around the 15th century, didn't they? Or around 15 to 16, somewhere in between there. I want to poke people. I want to poke people to death. Well, as you may recall, your siege men got all hard for rockets and cannons. Uh-huh. Land army. The territorial army or provincial militia drew of nobles, princes, lords, squires, with their retinues, the garrison of clerical dignitaries, bishops, and from 1344 on, even the archbishop, the militias of royal towns, village bailiffs, and custodians. It served to defend the land and was called up as needed by the monarch. Oh. Pew. Language and literature. In the late 14th and early 15th centuries, both Czech and German was spoken in the Czech lands. German first appeared after German colonization and made its way largely into the towns, the upper classes, and literature, love poems, and bureaucratic language. Czech had evolved from Old Slavonic and was spoken by the poorer residents, becoming an official language only during the reign of Charles IV. Apart from these two languages, there was Latin, the language of books, chronicles, learned treaties, official deeds, and documents. Latin was the language of the Church and the Bible, and served as the medium of international communication. The development of the Slavic language and its emancipation was the domain of the monasteries, including Sasau, from the early Middle Ages on. The preacher John Hus was one of the pioneers of fostering the Czech language. As for literature, Czech found its due place from the early 14th century in various genres: spiritual and secular lyricisms, love stories, epics, and dramas. Among the oldest examples were legends. Example about Judas Iscariot, Pontius Pilate, Pilates. I wonder how many Pilates Pontius can do. The lives of the saints, knightly epics, chronicles, and satires. Apart from the official documents and Latin correspondence, was written in Czech from the end of the 14th century. Rapiers came about in Italy in roughly the 1490s through the Renaissance. I know, yeah. The German side sword led directly to the development of the rapier. Can I expect rapiers in the next game? Because I would really like rapiers in the next game. It would be really cool to have rapiers in the next game. When was this game taking place? 1403 or some shit? Fuck. But I want rapiers. I want to poke people. And I want the sword breaker. I want the freaking sword breaker. The sweet ass little combat dagger. I just want to chip their blades. Just going broken. Liturgical items. Church fixtures and fittings comprised the liturgical devices used in church services and statues, paintings, and frescoes, which served to enlighten the uneducated populace in simple terms about biblical stories and religious observance. Pulpit, the raised platform from where the priest gives sermons or readings. Altar, where the sacrifice of communion is consecrated. This could be in the main or side aisle, often highly ornate. The caborium, the receptacle for the Eucharist, the transformed sacred host. Chalice, the Eucharistic goblet for the wine, transformed into the blood of Christ. Paten, the shallow bowl or plate used to hold the sacred host, body of Christ, and the monstrance, the ornate cask to hold the Eucharist. Rapiers were not battlefield weapons in the least anyway. They were gentlemanly self-defense weapons that were total shit against any kind of armor. Not if you get in between the plates, you fool. You fool. They're just stabbing in there, jamming in there like a fucking drain cleaner. Just right in there. I don't even care if they're not battlefield weapons. I just want to shove shit down people's fucking plates. Just right in the weak points, just... It don't matter. It's super thin and pointy. It'll go right through, at least for about a couple inches. Just stab them. Just give a nice little stab. Right in between. What, Doc? Weeb. Liturgy. Religious services in the Middle Ages were held quietly and in Latin. A medieval mass differed from today's in its language, approach, and the relationship between the priest and the congregation. People stood or moved around, while the priest said the liturgy alone, without service, without a sermon, and without communion. He stood with his back to the congregation, facing the main altar at a distance from the faithful. The sermon was held quite apart from the Mass in keeping with a special rite and in between services of worship. Holy Communion, the Eucharist, was available to the common folk only at Christmas and Easter. The inaccessibility of the sacred ritual, along with disgust at the state of the church, later led to the revolutionary Hussite reform movement, which opened up both the Mass and the Eucharist rites to the wider populace. Did I just have a stroke? What are you talking about? What happened? What did I do? You do know rapiers can pierce chainmail, yeah? Easier than other weapons. Where am I? Ah. Where? Yeah. I forget where I was. Yeah. Religious services in the Middle Ages were held quietly and in Latin. A medieval mass differed from today's in its language, approach, and the relationship between the priest and the congregation. People stood or moved around while the priest said the liturgy alone, without servers, without a sermon, and without communion. He stood with his back to the congregation, facing the main altar at a distance from the faithful. The sermon was held quite apart from the Mass, in keeping with a special rite, and in between services of worship. Holy Communion, the Eucharist, was available to the common folk only at Christmas and Easter. The inaccessibility of the sacred ritual, along with disgust at the sacred church... Oh, I did read it. Oh, sorry. Reform movement which opened up both the Mass and the Eucharist rites to a wider populace. Yeah. Especially the Type 5 and 1R6 and rapiers are apparently Spanish. The term rapier appears both in English and German. For a light, long-pointed, two-edged sword. It is a loan from Middle Ages, especially Paris, first recorded in 1474. The origin of the rapier is more likely Spanish. Oh, okay. Just gonna drop the Home Depot skeleton, are you? Just like that? Not even a warning. Wow. Alright then. Locks and keys in ancient times were made of wood, later of metal. Progress came with the year 1000, with the invention of automatically falling latches and the wider use of key locks. Fixed locks were supplemented by padlocks, protected by a metal casing. In the Middle Ages, there were also plug lock systems in use, as well as more advanced designs with a turning key. According to archaeological finds, locks were commonly used in the country, even though ordinary latches were typical. The richer townspeople and nobility had their locks richly decorated. As late as the 14th century, locks were fitted to the outsides of the door. The Spanish first made the dome hill to the rapier, but the Italian made the classic wire cage for the rapier. Oh yeah, well, it's 16 feet more than yours, Emperor. Emperor over here gaping, making shit smell, smelling up my chat like a gross fucking person. Yucko. You have the negative, the more negative. Over here looking like a monkey. Take that, asswipe. Medieval crisis. As it drew to a close, the late medieval world was shaken to its foundations. Old certainties fell apart and new hazards and dangers emerged. This crisis was reflected mainly in the demographic, political and religious, cultural and intellectual areas. Plague epidemic ravaged Europe from the mid-14th century on, although Bohemia largely escaped the worst. Even before that, agricultural production was Even before that, agricultural production was in crisis, as it could no longer feed the burgeoning population in Europe. In the west of the continent, the 100 Years' War was raging between England and France. In the east, the Teutonic Knights were engaged in long-term warfare in the Baltic against the Polish. The Russian principalities were being overrun by the Mongol rulers of the Golden Horde. Nice. Good job, Plague. Nobody will ever know unless I say that Plague timed Emperor out for 69 for 20 seconds. Where was I? Fuck it. Plague epidemic ravaged Europe from the mid-14th century on, although Bohemia largely escaped the worst. Even before that, agricultural production was in crisis, as it could no longer feed the burgeoning population of Europe. The west of the continent. The 100 Years' War was raging between England and France. In the east, the Teutonic Knights were engaged in long-term warfare in the Baltics against the Polish. The Russian principalities were being overrun by the Mongol rulers of the Golden Horde, and the Ottoman Empire, which was to become Europe's prime enemy in the early modern period, was getting increasingly stronger. Alongside these large-scale conflicts, numerous peasant uprisings erupted, especially in the West. Universal unity was an important cornerstone of the medieval world was shaken by the Papal Schism, and the long-term failure to resolve them, and disputes within the church itself. Imperial power, which stood for the second pillar of this universal unity and the role of secular power, was restricted to the ruler of the Central European lands, especially the German countries, with varying degrees of real power. A whole lot of shit happened in a very short period across the relatively small region of Europe. Ow. Monastery hierarchy. The Benedictines were a decentralized order. All the monasterial communities were independent, and the respective were headed by an abbot. His representative at the monasterial level was the prior. The smaller organizational units were in turn called priories, with the prior at the head. The abbot frequently traveled on the king's or pope's business or to arrange the business affairs of the order, and could thus be away for extended periods. At such times the prior would stand in for him. Among the other occupations at the monastery were watchmen, bell-ringing circators, whose task was to patrol the entire monastery during hours of mandatory work, study and prayer, and ensure that there were no idlers and everyone maintained order and silence. The various administrative sections of the establishment were entrusted to obedientaries. The preceptor, or cantor, was responsible for training the monks in ecclesiastical singing and conducting services. The procuring of food, beverages, and fuel for the community and its guests was the job of the general Berzar, or steward of the monastery cellars. The brother Celerius, while accounts and administration were down to the provost. The infirmarian gave shelter and care for any ailing monks. In the monastery of St. Procopius at the time of Abbot Peter, 1377 to 1405, i.e. the time of our game, there were about 30 monks. Their names in the game derived from the surviving records of brothers actually there at the time. 1377 to 1405. In April of 1403, a loud bout of screaming was heard in Sasso Monastery. It was heard, but the cause was never found. Oh. I'm here. Oh, poor ducky. Hold on. There you go, my sweet little angel. Money. Currency in the Middle Ages took the form coins minted in denominations corresponding to the quantity of precious materials used, gold or silver. In Bohemia, the silver Prague groschen long served as legal tender. The decimal system was not in general use. 1 groschen divided into 7 pennies, and those in turn into 14 hellers. Similarly, counting and calculating was done in dozens, 12, and 3 scores, kappa, to 60. However, since this would be rather confusing for us today, the smallest unit of value in the game is 0.1 groschen. Nah, just kidding, I bashed those smug-ass monk skulls with a face by one. And they couldn't do a thing because their dumbasses were locked in. Fools. Around the year 1400, the quality, and hence the value, of the groschen dropped significantly, with other metals being added to the silver. This was to do with the with overexploitation of the mining deposits of the most valuable metals around Kuttenberg, central Bohemia, and Jihlava, Iglau, in Moravia, and a shortage of goods for exchange with foreign countries. Economic and financial problems at the time led to growing anti-Semitism, a rise in crime, and, ultimately, the collapse of the Czech currency. Counterfeit coins were in circulation alongside genuine ones, despite the fact that counterfeiting was one of the most serious crimes and was punished by burning at the stake. Coins were circular and marked with a crown or the crowned head of the monarch on the obverse, and in Bohemia the Czech lion in a square on the reverse, substituted by an eagle in Moravia. Smaller silver coins were minted right up to the Hussite Wars. The mint employed 2 mint masters to vouch for the precious metal quality of the coins under mortal oath. The prices of goods and articles varied locally and changed frequently. Morgue. The morgue was a simple building of wood or stone, built near the church in a corner of the cemetery. It was the place where biers and coffins with the deceased were put. Here, the family kept vigil over the body of the departed and buried it and prepared it for burial. Actually, you kill one monk and suddenly about 60 Sasso guards come in like 5 seconds. Unfortunately for them, those numbers only serve to fuel my bloodlust. 60 Sasso guards? It's not that many there. What are you talking about? You're over-exaggerating, you liar. You big old liar, pants on fire. Municipal finances. Towns and cities always had to look after their budgets, so they collected taxes, custom duties, tolls, and unjust goods tariffs. The most common form of tax was paid twice a year, in an amount dependent on the assets of each respective citizen. Another source of civic revenue, money, were monies made by the city council or the city court for the making of contracts, documents, records, and other ongoing activities. Fees and taxes were paid by the city residents based on their businesses, levied on products sold or services provided. The treasury also collected money for interest payments, fines, building funds, loans, and various forms of letting and rentals to serfs. Letting and rentals. Written records were maintained of all revenues. It's actually closer to 50 guards, but they seem to spawn inside the closest room. How? What? That don't make no sense. The city council paid out some of the money for the purchase of real estate, paid the nobility for defense and security, invested in schools, civic cultural development, churches, administration, and the salaries of city officials, construction, operation, and maintenance, and the upkeep of municipal buildings. Alright. Yeah. Names and surnames. You know what? I will go shank a monk. You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to stop the reading just to shank a monk. You know what? Yeah. That's what we're gonna do. This is the last thing we're ever gonna do on this game. Other than reading. Fuck that. I'm going to shank a monk, not get interrupted. I hunger for the monks. Alright. always have my best ass kicking boots on. Oh, it's raining over here too. Neato. Do I have any more savey potions? Savior schnoppies? No. I'm gonna see if that one dude has them. Yo, Nico, Nee, where the fuck is that? You don't have it. You suck. Oh well. Guess we're not saving. The innkeeper has some? Oh.
Yeah.
Let's go get some, because I really want to keep the rain around. I don't know when it's going to go away, but I want to keep it while I'm reading. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zach, farmhand, townsman. Where's that stinky binko? There you are.
I hope I can be a...
Savior Schnuppers. Ain't no rest for the wicked. Money don't grow on trees. When should be permitted?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm Jack the Ripper. Whores and wenches are my thing for killing. Hostility towards them, I really don't care. Here we go, baby. Ooh. Let's put that one on. Right. I ain't even gonna stab her. I'm just gonna go in there and fucking bonk someone on the head. Oh, before that, I actually want to go right here. And open that. You know what I'm doing. Yeah, it's Hound Skull. It's a beaky helmet. It's cool as shit. It has slightly less armor than another one, but I really don't care.
Lord in heaven, what have you done now?
Escape route? No. The opposite, in fact. Uh-oh.
Don't move a finger. Surrender.
Fuck you,
You've
whore.
committed a violation.
I don't give a shit. Fuck you.
Come here, kitty liver. Fucking hell.
No, fuck off.
Is that all you You'll get
Yeah. Fuck off.
someone there?
Damn right, someone's here, boy. Ah. Fuck. I can't. It's not letting me do certain moves right away.
I'm going to enjoy.
Fuck off. Back off. Oh. Fuck. Ow. 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 Ah, how do they do the fucking quick ass wombo combo right there? Fuck off. Back up. Ow. Nope. Back up, boy. What you doing? Oh, I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. Hey, where's the other guards? Don't you want to bring more people? Is your God going to save you now? Is your God going to save you from me? Come back. Come back here. Come here. Come here. I want that booty. Oh, I can smell it. Yes. Yes. I am the right hand of God here to deliver his message. You have all failed. Every last one of you. Don't run from me. Don't run from me. You're right. Nobody gives a shit about these ass wipes. Kill Pius? Where are you going? Where are you going?
I'll have to get something to eat. I'm starting to get hungry.
I don't give a shit about how hungry you are. Go fucking starve to death for all I care. Stab me. There are no screams. The vows of silence they've stayed true to, even in death. Another victim shows up willingly to the slaughter. Come here. Come here, little piggy.
What the hell was that?
Come here, little piggy. Oh, I can hear you squeal. There are still like 40 monks left. Really? How are there so many? I don't remember there's many. Oh, looks like someone knows how to open doors. Too bad it's not opening any doors to your freedom. Sucker. Where you going? Where you going, bitch? Where you going? Where you going? Come here. Coming for that booty. Come here. Well, you're getting stabbed whether you like it or not. Like a Catholic rabbits. Jeez. I don't see any guards spawning. What have you stumbled into? You've stumbled into a massacre. This is retribution for being boring as shit and not knowing how to party. Yeah, baby. Woo! This is what you get when you don't party hardy. Rengar said that, Emperor said that, if I attack monks, you know, apparently like 50 guards or some shit will just show up. Which obviously is a lie, because I only killed like 4 or 5. The monastery was corrupt and had to be cleansed. Otherwise, the roots of evil will still be planted. And there will be no room for other growth. I can see his armor, his clothes getting fucked up. Well, nothing really happened. It was like 5 guards or some shit. I think you put an extra 0. Uh-oh, is my game going to crash? I think I broke the game. Uh-oh. Wait. Wait. It's a black screen for me right now. Alright, I'm going to have to close the game and then start it back up. I need to do it in daytime for the horde. Was it not daytime? It was just raining. That was it. No, you don't. You're a liar. Why is it not load? Why you no load? Load. Come on. Ah, what's going on? Alright, I closed GOG. Hopefully that does something. GOG is back up. Oh, there we go. Game is launching again. Get away. Go away. Oh my god, I don't care. Go away. No, 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 no. I don't want to hear your stupid noises. Shut up. All right. There we go. There you go. I don't think that the time should matter. See, look. It's the very day. I should have had time enough to kill someone during the day. Anyway. Back to the codex. Oh. Did I read this part? I think I did, yeah. I read municipal finances, yeah. Names and surnames. The period up to the 13th century was characterized by Slavonic names, mostly of pagan origin. Common people would keep names short and simple like Odlin, the robust, Dobros, the good, and Shvar, the praised. Names were also given according to place in society. Compound names such as Drahomira, who values peace, Boleslav, more famed, more fabled, and Ludmila, dear to the people, were reserved for royalty and the nobility. Christian names were derived from Latin, Paul, Sylvester, Florian, Hebrew, James, Daniel, John, and Greek, Andrew, Nicholas, and Peter. Once Christianity took over completely, only names belonging to Christian martyrs were permitted. In the towns and the countryside, the prevailing names were John, Peter, Margaret, Catherine, and Anna, while the nobility retained the privilege of using names like Sophia, Elizabeth, Jacob, Ulrich, or Herman. Additional bynames added information about the location of the family seat, social or religious standing, or about relationships with relatives. Gross. For example, Divish Zitalmberka, in Kingdom Come Deliverance, Divish of Talmberg. John Hans Capen of Perkstein. Heinrich of Perkstein, son of Henry. In addition, sometimes an epithet would be used. For example, Josach Heinkenher of Waldeck, John the Younger of Hradek, etc. I don't know how to pronounce these names. Why do you keep putting this shit in my face if I can't read it? Can I have, like what dictionaries do with how to pronounce? The growing population and the limited number of first names gave rise to the surname as we know it today. The surname was derived from the place where the person lived, like in English, for example, hill, woods, forest. From their occupation, coachman, miller, smith. From their physiognomy or appearance. Physiognomy. Ruddy, small, brown, or were patronymics, derived from the father's forename, Davis, Little John, or matronymics, derived from the mother's forename, Marriott or Bean. That hurts my head. I can't. I actually can't. None of that knowledge was retained. It hurts my head too much. Necronomicon. The Necronomicon is a fictional magical book invented by the writer Howard Phillips Lovecraft in 1924. The name literally translates as the Book of the Dead. This was supposedly a volume written in the 8th century by a mad Arab, Abdul al-Hazred al-Azred. That hurts. I'm sorry. Containing dangerous information on the practices of black magic and the occult. The Pope had the book banned and ritually burned, yet copies spread around the world. All this sounded so plausible that many readers took the existence of the book for real. The hoax was helped by the reference to Queen Elizabeth's mage, John Dee, who had supposedly translated the books, but according to Lovecraft, he had never published it. The book's fame spread further and wider, and it has become a living part of pop culture, to which we also subscribe. Nobility. The nobility, aristocracy, was the highest level of feudal society beneath the monarch, with the power and legal privileges commensurate with their landed title or family crest. They were directly answerable to the king, and the lands in their possession were only leasehold, for which they had to pay the king dues and were obligated to provide military assistance in the event of war. Noble status was hereditary, as were the associated land rights and responsibilities. The land came with its inhabitants, who had to pay their liege lord rent and labor on his farmlands. The oldest Czech families include the Lord of Buzik, example the Zajac Herr, family of Hessenberg, of Benischnuf, from Dube and Kralum, and Ronau, I don't know. After half an hour of traveling in Minecraft, I finally made it out of the fucking snow biome. Why would you want to leave it? And the Rosenbergs. In the 14th century, the Czech title Pan, Lord, was reserved for the wealthy members of the higher nobility. who had the right to elect the king and sit in the territorial diet or landstag. Landtag. Landtag. But later spread to the lower nobility, church dignitaries, members of town councils, and eventually common burghers, becoming the equivalent of Mr. in English as it is today. A nobleman didn't have to be educated person. Often it was quite enough that he had a military upbringing. He had his subjects and servants to take care of administration and physical work. His main duties were the collection of taxes, managing the militia, and all hereditary functions. Because no trees literally couldn't survive? What do you mean there's no trees? Really? Why was there no trees there? Should have been. It's like dark oak, I think, or some shit. Were you in like an ice biome or some shit? A Thiaknur, or lord of the manor in Shek Zeman, was a provincial nobleman of local origin, long established in a given territory. A baronet, Vladika. I don't know how to say these words. It hurts. Administered numerous estates, blah 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 blah. Yeomen, who formed the lower nobility, had no property of their own and served the higher nobility. Nobility unquestionably influenced the medieval art, since they were often the sponsor of artistic works. This applied not only to architecture, paintings and sculptures, but also to fashion accessories, hairstyles, and furniture. That sounds terrible. Why would there be no trees in a city? That sounds stupid. Paganism. Pagan ways survived in Bohemia even after the adoption of Christianity, mainly in the form of the folk traditions and customs. These contained elements from the cultures of the Celts, Germans, and Slavs, the respective influences intermingling over time, and becoming more and more adapted to Christianity. Some customs kept their original form, for example, folk superstition and rhymes. Others gave way to church pressure completely. Paganism in the Slavic countries survived in motifs, adorned jewelry, and objects, in folk medicine, and in the form of holidays. The winter and summer solstices, the Mardi Gras, Easter, Walpurgis Night. That's a weird Walpurgis Night and Midsummer Night. I don't even know about Walpurgis. All Souls, I don't know about that. Advent and Christmas. All were modeled on original pagan celebrations, but were renamed under Christianity and modified in contempt. Oh. Pennants and banners. In the heat of a medieval battle, where most of the combatants had the same or similar equipment, the pennants or banner was often the only sign differentiating friend from foe. Pennants also helped lift morale and to organize the various units during troop movements. Around 1400, pennants and banners took the shape of extended triangles, upright triangles, and squares. Flags were fashioned from colored canvas or silk, and the depictions or emblems were painted onto them, most often the coats of arms of the respective feudal lords. Cavalry carried small pennants on their spears, and craftsmen who were members of the guilds also had their own banners. The guild banner was emblematic of the profession and was shown at public ceremonies and at military and other ostentatious events. The banner of the Czechlands date back to the 13th century and depicts ghouls, ghoulies. I don't know how to say that word. That's a weird word. Jewels? a lion rampant. i.e. a two-tailed silver lion raised on its hind legs on a red background. Okay. I don't know what that means. Oh my. We're almost done with this first part. Yeah. Religious pilgrimages were an important part of the Christian world. There were a number of reasons for embarking on a pilgrimage: the pursuit of forgiveness of sins, curtailment of purgatory for the soul of the pilgrim or his loved ones, requests for healing or other divine help, expressing thanksgiving or profound piety, and an effort to deepen it. The destinations of pilgrimages were places connected with Christ's life and work, or places where saints had lived or were interred. The most important pilgrimage site was the city of Jerusalem and the place of the Holy Sepulchre. The most frequented sites in Europe were Rome, the seat of the popes, associated with the work of St. Peter, and the city of Santiago de Compostela. Santiago de Compostela, and the relics of St. James. In Bohemia, the most important pilgrimage site was in Prague, where the remains of several saints were interred over time, the most important of which was the country's patron saint, St. Wenceslas, who was laid to rest in St. Vitus Cathedral. To carry out a pilgrimage was to undergo a strenuous and often hazardous journey, whether by land or by sea, and it was a significant achievement for an individual. Providing shelter and assistance to a pilgrim was considered a moral deed. Naturally, the development of the pilgrimage became linked to commercial elements, especially around pilgrimage sites and inns along the route. Often it was impossible to recognize pilgrims by their specific attire. It was possible, which we can see in many illustrations consisting of a cloak, a staff, and a script or satchel and badges. A common motif or symbol of pilgrimages was St. James's shell. St. James's shell. It was believed that such a shell brought back from a pilgrimage was blessed and therefore had supernatural powers. These shells were sometimes placed, for example, in the bottom of a well to ensure water purity. Pillory. The pillory would be located in the middle of the square, and it was here that the lesser punishments were meted out, for transgressions such as perjury, slander, or various frauds. It was typically a wooden or stone pillar to which the convicted were tied by a chain for a specific time, hours, or even days. They were then punished by the whole community, being spat on, insulted, mocked, and pelted randomly on a daily basis. The earliest prayers were dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Hail Mary, in Latin, Ave Maria. Beneath thy protection, sub tuum praesidium, with a rosary and numerous litanies. The prayer followed the pagan formulations, which were modified with the adoption of Christianity, to fit the new doctrine. In addition to the Marian prayers, the more frequently chanted were the Lord's Prayer, the Credo, Declaration of Faith, and the Angel of the Lord. Litanies were dedicated primarily to Christ, but also to other saints. The priest would incant, and the people respond, Kyrie eleison. The monks knew and used many more prayers, relating to the daily cycle. Hermits and others who dedicated themselves to God in solitude recited the scripture and psalms. During the liturgy, the prevailing language was Latin, with some prayers or songs in the vernacular. Example, Lord, be kind to us, or St. Wenceslas. Roman Catholic Church. In the pre-Hussite period, the church held extensive estates, sometimes exceeding in value the property of the nobility or even the king himself. The church also collected various taxes and fees, which led to conflicts not only between the church and the secular world, but within the church itself. In addition to the clergymen, priests, and their helpers, the ecclesiastical. I don't know how to say that. Ecclesiastical? Maybe? The ecclesiastical establishment was also represented by votaries, archbishops, church officials, clerics, and monks. Altogether, the church nourished and employed about a tenth of the population. High running costs and failures to ensure either the physical or spiritual well-being of the populace, coupled with the numerous woes of wars and pestilence. Sorry, my brain just can't read right now. It won't make words happen. Coupled with the numerous woes and wars of and pestilence, led to a radical weakening of ecclesiastical power and loss of confidence in the church as an institution in the 14th century. It brought the first sign of a Reformation movement, as well as many alternative heretical sects and renewed interest in old pagan traditions. Mass was at the time more of a social occasion than a spiritual one, bringing people together. They would enjoy themselves, even flirt or make deals. This changed with the Hussite Reformation movement and the return to true devotion. Declining trust in the church was encouraged by the first strict translations of the Bible, thanks to which the ideas actually contained in the Bible could finally spread by word of mouth, even among the illiterate population. The spark of revolution had been struck. Safe conduct. The safe conduct document was issued by a member of the highest social tier to guarantee the bearer's safety. Most often it gave protection in a particular territory during the journey, and sometimes the bearer was also provided with an armed escort. For example, John Hughes received a letter of safe conduct from Sigismund of Luxembourg when he went to the Council of Constance. He did indeed survive the journey in good health, though the safe conduct did nothing to save him from being sentenced by the ecclesiastical court there to burn at the stake. Oh my. Ecclesiastical. It hurts. Why do you keep using that word? It hurts me, my tongue. Dude looks like he's struggling to read on his own. They're just like, what's going on, guys? He's just like, hold on. Let me wait a minute. Schools. School-based tuition developed only at the end of the 11th century, mainly in the monasteries and churches. Basic instruction held in Latin encompassed the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, Latin, rhetoric, dialect, and the quadrivium, mathematics, geometry, astronomy, and church music. During the High Middle Ages, there were 2-tier Latin schools for boys. Girls were only very rarely educated. Indeed, education in general did not carry the weight it does today. Most noblemen and wealthy burghers were illiterate, hiring scribes and scriveners as needed. Later on, the towns came to host centers of secular education, with the ultimate flowering thereof being the establishment in 1348 of an international format university in Prague by Emperor Charles IV. Slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse, or shambles, was located on the edge of town. This was the only place that animals could be slaughtered, with butchers' stalls springing up around them. The cattle were examined by the guildmaster. Only if he vouched for their health could they be slaughtered, and sold by the butchers. Butchering elsewhere was punishable by a fine. Sources of light. The main source of domestic light after sunset consisted of fire pits or fireplaces. If that was not enough to light up paths or dwellings, cloth or tallow torches, oil lamps, lanterns, candlesticks, or candles were used. Ceramic or metal oil lamps were bowl-shaped, sometimes with an ear-shaped handle. In them was a wick steeped in oil, later on supplemented with wax. In the richer homes there were chandeliers with candles hanging on the chains from the ceiling. In villages there were simple lamps, burning tallow instead of vegetable oils, and torches made of split lumber. Tallow candles stank, smoked, and dripped. They had to be constantly wiped, and the tallow collected for reuse, and therefore they were mounted on candlesticks with a bowl at the base. In Central Europe in the Middle Ages, beeswax was considered an extremely precious commodity, and also made its appearance as a means of exchange among guilds. Payment in wax. Almost done with this bit. So close. Saint Wenceslas's crown. After the coronation of Charles IV as King of Bohemia, a new and singular ceremonial jewel was fashioned, the crown of Saint Wenceslas. It was made from the old Premysliad crown, and the monarch himself dedicated it to Saint Wenceslas. No Czech king was ever allowed to wear it, but could borrow it for his coronation for a fee. The crown is of pure gold with gemstones and pearls, kept in a strong room with 7 locks above the chapel of St. Wenceslas in Prague Cathedral. The keys are held by the leaders of the Czech state, the president, the prime minister, the archbishop of Prague, etc. There is a legend that if the crown is worn on the head of anyone other than the rightful Czech king, the wearer will soon die. It is reported that during World War II, the Nazi Reichsprotester for Bohemia and Moravia, Reinhard Heydrich put it on, and died shortly afterwards at the hands of assassins. The story is probably apocryphal, but certainly interesting. Oh. Wow. Alright. I need to get water. My mouth is getting dry, so I'll be right back. In the meantime, enjoy the music. I'm right here. I had to get water. Oh, calm down, drama queen. I'm here. Don't you ever question my love. Ah! Tithes. A tithe is the name for a compulsory tax levied since ancient times. It was paid to the parish priest or other religious institution. The term tithe comes from the Old English and means 1/10. The amount of the tithe being 1/10 of the value of the harvest. The inhabitants of monastery estates had the misfortune to be taxed twice by the church. Once in the form of a tithe, the second time as a mandatory levy for their occupation of church land. I had to get water. My throat was getting all dry. Toilets in the countryside or during wars, people went outdoors. Toilets. In the countryside or during wars, people went outdoors to relieve themselves. To the cowshed, or the dung heap in the yard. Houses of a higher social standing had a little hut built by the dung heap. At night, chamber pots were used, tucked under beds, and were emptied on the dung heap in the morning. Gross. They had to, smell that shit overnight? Ew. In the castles and in wealthier homes, we would find a privy, a toilet located whenever possible in one of the heated rooms in an oriel on the first floor. There wasn't necessarily a door, and inside it was a bench seat with a round hole. Not commonly, it was in the banquet hall itself, so one would not have to depart, and could even observe the goings on at table from the privy. Privies used to be in a niche cut in the wall, with a sloping vent shaft leading to the outside of the building. In either case, the fecal matter would fall freely along the castle walls into the ditch or down the slope. Gross. Privies were gradually upgraded and flushed through with rainwater. They might also have a flap added that discharged the excrement once the flap was released by a foot lever. Despite this, up to the 16th century, it was common practice to empty chamber pots out of windows onto the city streets. Ew. Look, I can love one thing without loving another, okay? I don't have to love Among Us. Tools. The basic agricultural tools in the Czech medieval village were adzes, hoes, shovels, spades, shears, knives, axes, flails, scythes, rakes, forks, and also plowing tools such as beamed plow, turn plow, ard plow, and harrow. Each craft had need of its own special equipment and tools. That sounds ridiculous. It's still Among Us no matter what. What, is it like everyone gets to kill each other or some shit? Is that what the new map is supposed to be? Is it still you just gotta run away or some shit from some dude? Town gates. The city gates that there were always weird. They were always at least two, served to watch over the comings and goings of the city dwellers, and tolls and duties were collected there from traders for goods brought in and sold. The ground level housed the armory and storage facilities. The highest level featured an astronomical clock or town clock. The gate tower was typically a rectangular tower of greater or lesser height, with a passage through and a drawbridge over a frontal moat. The walls of some cities also included a water gate, through which the townspeople made their way to the water supply. There were also dedicated gates for the executioner and his henchmen, for unclean people, as well as Jewish why can't? Why does my freaking brain go Jewish? As well as Jewish gates. After closing time, it was only possible to enter the city with a special permit from the councilors. Anyone who failed to make it back in time had to spend the night outside the city walls. The gate was locked with a key that was kept overnight with the bailiff or the head of the city council. Well, you don't run away. The goal is to find out who the killer is. Well, yeah. If it's still the same game mode, it sounds poops. Towns and cities. In the Middle Ages, the merchant settlements and villages on major trade routes or around castles became the first towns. They were founded by specialized businessmen called locators, allocators. Their task was to seek out settlers, to prepare and apportion the land, and to build a community. The rulers set down the rights and obligations concerning the locators and settlers. For example, the level and method of collecting taxes and benefits, town privilege rules of self-government, capital justice rights, trading, market rights, and 1 mile right, extending to 1 mile beyond the town walls, and brewing and handling beer, brewing rights. Newly established settlements and cities were often exempt from taxes for a certain period. Hence, many Czech villages are called lota, or grace period. Towns were of different types: royal, seigneurial, mining, and dowry, which belonged to the queen. Seigneurial towns were divided into not that word again. Ecclesiastical, secular, feudal, and those of the royal chamber. What? That word hurts me. Ecclesiastical. Yeah. Apart from the feudal settlements, towns were mostly rectangular in layout, with streets perpendicular to a central square, featuring a rat house, town hall, market, and a church. Until the 14th century, the main streets and squares of the largest towns remained unpaved, uncobbled. Waste was emptied directly into the street or thrown into waste pits dug around the house. Ew. Despite the fact that sanitation had existed since antiquity. Gutters of rammed earth carried sewage and rainwater alongside the streets, and an unpleasant smell remained hovering over the town. Settlements were surrounded by wooden palisades, and from the second half of the 13th century there had to be at least 2 gates through it. In Kingdom Come Deliverance, we reconstructed the towns based on a range of medieval designs, mostly larger and wealthier than they were in reality. Right. See, I knew about this. But it's nice that they are self-aware of their shit, and I'm glad that they put it in in the details of their game. Travel and traveling merchants. Travel was dangerous in the Middle Ages, but necessary, especially for traders. The roads differed by their purpose. Trade routes had river fords, bridges, inns, signposts, milestones, and so on. The pilgrimage routes were without such luxuries. A person was able to cover about 25 to 30 kilometers per day by wagon. Wayfarers would overnight at inns near road junctions, their goods stored in a depot. In times of instability and chaos, the kind of which the Kingdom Come Deliverance story takes place. Traders and travelers would often be waylaid by marauders, which led to traveling in groups with a hired armed escort. Bohemia imported canvas, silk, and other textiles, weapons, wine, salt, seafood, saltwater fish, southern fruit, spices, and other exotic and luxury goods. Goods exported included wheat, butter, honey, beeswax, beer, malt, freshwater fish, cheeses, and other local products. La trebe. The trebuchet is a siege weapon used to break up enemy formations or to smash gates and battlement walls. Although it resembles a catapult, its mechanism is different. The main contraption is a leveraged mechanism with a counterweight on one side and a projectile sling on the other. The counterweight sets the entire arm in motion, and the projectile, most often a dressed stone, flies up to several hundred meters along its ballistic trajectory. Apart from stones, the payload could be burning bales of straw, dead bodies, or barrels of feces. Ew. The disadvantage of the weapon was how demanding and time-consuming it was to load. Brain. This is the point of the stream where my brain dies. And we're like almost done with the general codex. There's really not. There's like 2 other parts of this that have like 30 things in it. But otherwise, everything else there's a lot less to weed. But I do find each of these little factoids, the little descriptions, interesting. I really like it. And I'm kind of glad that I saved it for last. You know, it would slow up the game quite a bit if I were to read every single time that they popped up. And it's good to just reflect on it while I'm reading, you know. Fuck. Why do I have a hard time making noise? It's like it's difficult all the time for every time I try to talk. It's like my voice wants to crack all the time. And my facial expressions don't match the words sometimes, so some words don't come out how they should. So I really have to articulate myself in order to get the words to sound how they're supposed to sound. But I don't want to do that. Trial by ordeal. Apart from resolution by municipal or territorial courts or justice, up to the 14th century it was common, though unofficial, in Bohemia to turn to God's judgment, or trial by ordeal. Guilt or innocence was proved by appealing to God. He had to judge guilt or innocence. A typical ordeal was to be put to the test by fire, hot water, poison, or dueling with the counterparty. The trial often ended in injury or even the death of the accused or the accuser. University. One of the oldest universities in Europe was Prague University, later Charles University, founded in 1348 by Charles IV. Students could study here at the arts, theological, medical, and later on, law faculties or schools. The arts faculty broadened basic religious education and taught grammar, rhetoric, dialects, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. In the early 15th century, more than 1,000 students were taught here, and were also provided with college accommodation. A total of 80% of the students at the University of Prague came from abroad, mainly from Hungary, Austria, Poland, and Germany. The medieval university allowed one to graduate with a bachelor's or master's degree or doctorate, conditional on passing a spoken viva voce examination before a commission. Some disciplines were studied for far longer than today, even more than 10 years. After passing the final examination, the student received a diploma. From the earliest times, the university was headed by a rector. Yep. For a second, I thought that was another word. Assisted by deans of the various faculties, followed by members of the university council, and below them the numerous tutors, professors, and cantors. Among others who lectured at the university was the preacher and reformer, John Hughes. Venoms and poisons. A fairly common method of dealing with socio-political issues. The most commonly used poisons were the alkaloids of henbane, datura flower, devil's snare, hemlock, or of toadstools mixed into food and drink. Among the most popular drugs were those inducing abortion, aphrodisiacs, and analgesics, and analgesics. I don't know how to say that word. Antiseptics, digestives, laxatives, narcotics to induce sleep or with soothing effects, and tonics to revitalize and give sustenance to the body. One of the worst cases of food poisoning that impacted the wider rural society involved rye infected with the parasitic ergot fungus. Before the source of the poisoning was discovered, thousands of people could be affected, which often led to accusations against some local witch, since ergot in a sublethal dose brings on delirium and hallucinations. Oh my. Indeed, quite often the underlying cause of witchery, superstitions, and allegations was nothing other than intoxication by psychoactive substances, sometimes used in the making of lotions and potions. In other words, people be dummy-dumb. Village. Bohemian villages underwent a significant transformation at the turn of the 13th and 14th centuries. Farmers became entitled to inherit their farms, and wages and trading began to have clear-cut rules. The village ground plan itself changed from erratically scattered homesteads toward organized plots, geometrically arranged, affording plenty of space for roads in the market. The number of houses ranged from 20 to 25. The hub of the village was the common or public space, which served as a social, cultural, and economic arena. The limits of the township were fenced or walled. Water mills. By the end of the 14th century, most rural towns had on average up to 7 mills. Water-powered forging mills, wash mills, saw mills, water pumps, bellows in foundries and smelters, and for beating hemps. Each mill consisted of 3 parts: the engine, the transmission system, and the work equipment. The driving mechanism or engine was a water wheel, and the gearing or transmission system consisted of many gears to convert the force from the slow-moving mill wheel to fast motion. Alright, Emperor. Work equipment differed according to the particular function of the mill. At the heart of grain mills were millstones, a lower stationary bedstone, and an upper rotating runner. The grain was grounded between the two. The mill had to be well situated. The current had to be neither too weak nor too strong, and in the Czech climate, the strength of the current in the river varied greatly with the seasons. This meant the miller had to build artificial mill runs and weirs with which to control the flow. Weapons. Oh, yeah. That's what I like to see. Weapons made of wood, stone, bone, and antler served mankind since prehistoric times. Initially, given the materials, the weapon of choice were pointed for stabbing. Spears, knives, arrows, etc. Later, with developments into metalworking, bladed weapons began to emerge. Daggers, axes, and swords. In addition to these two traditional types, we also distinguish blunt weapons, thrown weapons, hand firearms, artillery, and booby traps. I wish I could have all of those. Just thrown weapons, hand firearms, artillery, and booby traps. I want all four of those. Why didn't we have those? Well, I saw them. I saw like some booby traps just scattered around the province, but I was never ever able to actually use them. They were just there to look cool. In the Middle Ages, there were also plenty of lances, halberds, and crossbows. Ah! Why didn't I have crossbows? Why wasn't there lances? Why wasn't there crossbows? Why wasn't there lances? Why wasn't there crossbows? Crossbows would have been so cool in this game. I would have easily given up a fucking bow for a crossbow. And the bows don't work how they could be. God. Does nobody know how to fucking speed shoot? Rural weaponry was often derived from farming tools. From the 14th century, Europe began deploying cannon using gunpowder, long known in China, and firearms in general began to make slow inroads. Surviving records of the use of small arms in the Czech date back to the reign of Wenceslaus IV. They were used in 1398 during the siege of the Archbishop's mansion in near Prague. Windmills. My throat. Sorry. Windmills became prevalent in Europe between the 11th and 14th centuries. The most suitable environment for their construction was to be found in the foothills of mountains, on plains, and in coastal landscapes, where strong air currents abounded. They were generally wooden post mills, standing on a characteristic conical trestle log base. They would be rotated around the central stake to face into the wind. As a rule, the mill had 4 vanes, sails set in a rectangular cross mounted on the front wall of the building. As the wind leaned into them, they would turn to move a wooden gearing and transfer the torque to the millstones, located on the first floor. The disadvantages of windmills was either frequent need for repair and maintenance, and they were often struck by lightning. When operating, they vibrated intensely, making working in them neither pleasant nor safe. Women in the Middle Ages. In the medieval, purely patriarchal society, the man was the head of the family, with the roles of women determined by their relationship to him: daughter, sister, wife, mother, or widow. Girls had a short childhood according to municipal documents, reaching the age of majority between 12 and 15 years of age. Boys, in terms of territorial law, became grown-ups at 15. Men spent most of their time at their craft, trading or swordsmanship, depending on their station in life, while women attended to housework and family. Only a widow could obtain permission to conduct trade or a craft activity, with the help of journeymen, of course. Village women did not leave their homes very much or wander the vicinity needlessly. Some rules about venturing out were dictated by social class, while townswomen and noblewomen could venture beyond the home only when accompanied by their spouse or servants. The wives of artisans, merchants, and peasants could walk about unaccompanied. The domestic activities of well-to-do women included embroidery, cleaning, childcare, shopping, and playing musical instruments. Village women spent their time working in the fields of pastures, beekeeping, weaving, spinning, preparing food, knitting, and sewing. During the Middle Ages, the ideal of beauty was a thin, pale woman with long blonde hair, small rounded breasts, relatively narrow hips, and a narrow waist. The most important thing was, of course, health and fertility. A woman in the Middle Ages would, from the beginning of sexual maturity, be pregnant virtually every year. It was not unusual for one to be a mother 3 or 4 times over by the age of 20. Births were complicated and aftercare inadequate, so the risk of death in childbirth was great. Girls were afforded less attention than boys, but when it came to honor, the contrary applied. Old maids, seduced daughters, and unmarried mothers brought the family shame. While boys inherited the livelihood, the parents of girls had to accumulate a dowry with which to compensate the bridegroom. Woods. Well, speaking of whores, in this channel we don't discriminate. Whores are bad whether men or female. Well, not necessarily bad, but detestable. Yucko. The big icky sticky. Keep away, or I will spray a big vat of hot water, boiling and scalding, to make sure that you are cleansed through the epidermis. It took most of the game, but I finally made a backpack. A backpack? What do you mean you made a backpack? What game are you playing where you had to make a backpack? Woods. Forests belonged to the king, especially along the border zones, and played not only an economic but also a strategic role. Felled trees were used as a form of fortification called abatis. Abatices. I don't know. Shut up. From the 14th century on, it was considered proper to look after forests, and only the ruler could decree whether his subjects could cut down trees for construction. The ruler could also allow farmers rights to graze their livestock or to make charcoal, but on condition that the hinds and does could does. Why is there not a thingy right there? Why is there no apostrophes? But on condition that the hinds and does could bear their young unhindered. The subjects had to cut the grass and dry the hay on forest meadows, and were allowed to catch hares. Hunting of other game by anyone except the owner or his appointed huntsman was, however, prohibited under strict penalties. Aha. There are 14 things right here. There are 7 things right here. 37 over here, 33 over here, and 24 over here. We're going to go through all of that. But... I'm starting to sleepies again. Hold on. I ran through that water quick. Give me a moment, I'm snacking. in a few more days, I will be getting some things going for a super duper awesome secret stream. So within the next 2 weeks, there will be something happening, and I hope people show up for it. Alright, I'm finally back. So, we are now on the locations tab. Obviously, we're just going to start from the top, as always. Kuttenberg. Kuttenberg is today a district town of the central Bohemian region, 70 kilometers east of Prague. The founding of Kuttenberg, the official name of the city in the medieval ages, came about thanks to the discovery of silver ore deposits in the vicinity, and its location next to Sedlitz Monastery, the commercial and economic center of the region. City rights were acquired by Kuttenberg in 1318, after which time the economic activity of the city was taken care of by the so-called Obererberber, or royal clerk. To keep the operation of the mint and the mines to a high standard and safe, a list of legal edicts was issued. Ius regal montanorum, the mining regulative. The city soon became rich and had the same powers as the old town of Prague. The wealthiest inhabitants of Kuttenberg were the German population, while a lower class consisted of mine workers, smelters, mint workers, artisans, and servants. Almost every city dweller had some connection to silver mining, minting, coining, or trading. The treasurers of found and mined silver supported the development of other Czech cities, including the construction of new buildings in Prague. The architecture of Kuttenberg is due to Wenceslaus IV. During his reign, the former timber houses were rebuilt in brick, or as half-timbered. There were also churches, a sterling court, and other public works built at the time. Kuttenberg retained its Gothic genius loci to this day. Ledečko. Ledečko is a small village with a mill. During the 14th and 15th century, the village belonged to Arnold of Talmberg. The village originally had a second mill called Kostelnik. Merjid, a small village near Semopeš, which was the property of the Sasau monastery in the 15th century. The Stone Man. The Stone Man is an unusual standing stone, or stul, composed of red sandstone with a carving of a warrior with a spear. It is located at the crossroads in the Sasau region, between Merjid and the field tracts to Talmberg. According to an substantiated theory, the stele was brought here from the Sasau monastery, when it was reconstructed in the 14th century. The identities of the author of the relic carving and the man depicted remain a mystery. The stone man may have been a Slavic warrior, or Saint Longinus with a holy lance. His name is derived from the Greek word for lance, who according to the New Testament used it to pierce the side of Jesus on the cross. Boden Mill. In the Middle Ages, Boden Mill was a supplier of local villages and small towns. In the 17th century, it was part of Merjid, becoming the property of John Budinsky in 1678, from who it takes its name. From whom? Stone Man. Neuhof. According to written chronicles, Neuhof by Sasau was a noble's court, which was destroyed during extensive floods. The small town of Dvor was built in its place. Rattay of Sasau. Rattay was a small market town with two castles. The upper castle, known simply as Rattay Castle, and the lower castle, known as Perkstein or Perkenstein. The oldest written record of Rattay dates back to the 13th century, when it was the property of Pribislav of Rattay, mentioned in records in 1263 and 1289. At about the same time, ownership of Rattay passed to Burgrave of Uschitz. Yes, whose sons held several other castles and villages in the surrounding area. In 1293, King Wenceslas II gave Rattay to Bishop Tobias of Bishop. Then it became the property of Burgrave Heinrich of Dalba, who was the heir to the house of the Lord of Lipa. Rattay experienced its greatest renown and prosperity under the administration of Henry of Lipa, died 1329. His sons and grandchildren. His son John died in 1338, was the most politically active. The town was also governed by Henry's relatives, Lord of Perkstein. Under their administration, the two castles were built, as were the churches, and the village was given strong fortifications. Perkstein. The lower castle in Rattay, founded by Henry of Lipa before the mid-14th century, first mentioned dates from 1346, spreads over an island in the middle of the Ziave stream. The castle is separated from the town by a moat. This is a Burgfried-type castle with a massive tower, rounded corners in the rear, and 3 rooms on each floor. The entire structure is surrounded by ramparts. In 1447, the castle unfortunately caught fire and then quickly changed owners. It suffered even greater damage during the peasants' uprising in 1627. 100 years later, this... Sorry, water? 100 years later, from 1713 to 1724, it was rebuilt by Octavian Kinsky into a presbytery and bell tower. Upper Castle. The Upper Castle was built at the same time as the Lower Castle in the mid-14th century. It also burned in the same year as Perkstein, 1447. In the 16th century, it was rebuilt into a Renaissance chateau, and in 1672, renovated into the Baroque style. Today, it houses the local town hall. St. Matthew's Church. The Lower Rattay Church was built in the 1360s at the instigation of John Jessic of Perkenstein and his wife, Anna. The first church was probably a single-nave design and served as a parish church along with the Church of St. Nicholas, which no longer exists. From 1675 to 1691, it was demolished and rebuilt in the Baroque style according to plans by Andreas de Garde. It has survived in this form to the present day with just a few minor changes. The only remnants of the original church are the tombs of the estate owners. For example, a tombstone with the coat of arms and the Lords of Lipa mounted into the cemetery wall, and the base of the baptismal font from 1421. Cool. St. Nicholas's Church. Probably the older of the two churches within the castle walls. The first mentioned dates from 1343. It was located in the upper part of Rattay, before the upper wall, and partially served as a presbytery. From 1336, the Carrick Mill also belonged to the Rattay Presbytery. Rovna. The village of Rovna lies close to Silver Skeletons. Around 1150, a Romanesque church with a presbytery and cemetery were built there by monks from Sasau Monastery. The church was consecrated to the oldest patron of miners, Saint James the Greater. Saint James the Greater. Oh. The Romanesque frescoes are its most notable decorative elements, painted in 2 stages, in the mid-12th century and roughly 100 years later. Samopesh. Samopesh is a small village in the Sasau region not far from Rattay, first mentioned in 1397, together with 2 nearby mills. Bilin, also called Bart's and Booty Mill. It belonged to the Sasau Monastery until 1412, and was renowned as a center of agriculture and for an ancient species of wheat locally known as Samopesh spliata, Samopesh spelt, from which the village derives its name. Sorry, I'm stretching. My voice. You guys, it forces me to be so quiet. Sasau Monastery. Sasau Monastery is situated on a cliff above one of the many emenders of Sasau River, which isolates it on various sides. Its origins date back to the first half of the 11th century, when it was founded by Duke Aldrich, at the instigation of the monk Procopius. Saint Procopius, canonized in 1204, became renowned particularly for wanting to preserve the old church Slavonic religious rites in the monastery, rather than adopting the Latin liturgy. According to the oldest document mentioning the construction and development of Sasau Monastery, Vita Meral, the 11th century legend of Saint Procopius, the saint initially lived in a cave before building a church, consecrated to the Virgin Mary and Saint John the Baptist. The monastery of the Slavonic brothers imitated the design of the Abbey of St. Gall in Switzerland. The main building is the complex, and the complex was the church with an adjoining wooden cloister. The original dwelling of the abbot was located on the western side of the courtyard, below the presbytery. The monastery garden is situated in the northern part of the grounds. Here, remnants of the first Sasau stone church, consecrated in 1070, to the Holy Cross, have been unearthed. After the expulsion of the old church Slavonic monks from Sasau, the monastery was taken over by Latinist monks from Brevnov. Abbot Dethart continued with the rebuilding works, completing a simple, single-nave church in his lifetime. From the mid-12th century onwards, work resumed on the original plans, and the abbey church was reconstructed into a massive ornamented 3-nave basilica. The oldest simple wooden edifices from the beginnings of the monastery included the cloister, monks' quarters, the prelature, abbot's quarters, and the infirmary, hospital for monks. The cloister around the Elysian courtyard consisted of a quadrangle hallway with window openings, the monks' dormitory, the chapter house, the study, the refectory, dining hall, and kitchen. Sasau town. Originally, Sasau was a settlement on the left bank of the eponymous river, opposite the monastery. For over 100 years, the town was the property of the Benedictine monastery. Houses were centered around the Church of St. Martin and along the road to Prague and Kurim. During the Hussite Wars, the monastery and its surroundings fell into the hands of the Hussites, at which time the preacher gave sermons in the Czech language. Building work ceased from then until the mid 17th century, but the monastery survived for over 200 years after the monks were expelled. The monastery lands belonged to the local aristocracy. St. Martin's Church. The parish church of St. Martin was founded on the left bank of the Sasso River, in the middle of a small town in the 14th century. It is a single nave structure with a chancel, a steeple on the north side, and a chapel on the south. The entire complex is enclosed by a high graveyard wall that has survived to this day, although the church building itself has been altered completely, but for the original windows in the steeple. Skeleton. There was probably a settlement in the area where Scalis lies today as early as the 13th century, though there is no mention of the castle until 1361. The development of the town was prompted by silver mining in the area as well as the existence of the nearby parish of Rovna. The owners of the castle included Jacek of Skalitz from 1384 and Bodal of Drohonis, 1402 to 1403. Wenceslas IV took possession of it in 1403 and placed it under the governance of the Knights Sir Radzik Kobla. Kobla. Later the very same year, though, Kobla was forced to flee the castle to protect the inhabitants of Skalitz from King Sigismund's invading army, which torched the castle and the adjoining village. The estates was never renewed thereafter. In December 1403, Wenceslas IV granted the remains of the village to John Sokol of Lamberg. The ruin of the medieval castle and its fortifications was scavenged for building materials for the Church of St. John of Nepomuk in 1730. Today, only minor remnants of the gatehouse wall, those winger, and the perimeter walls remain. Skalitz Sassau District. The extent of the Kingdom Come Deliverance game world corresponds roughly to an area in southeastern Bohemia around Sasso River, in which many historical heritage sites are located. The most notable include Sasso Monastery and the castles in Bohemia Sternberg, Ratai, and Skalitz, of which only a few stones can be found today. Talmberg. The castle was built on a rocky promontory at the beginning of the 14th century, either by Ernst Arnold of Kaunitz or Rosnata of Uschitz. For more than 200 years, the castle was the seat of the lords of Uschitz, who were later renamed after the residents. The lords of Talmberg. In 1390, the castle came into the possession of Divish of Talmberg. The same year, it was seized by Havelmedic of Waldeck, who took Divish prisoner. Medic did not release Divish until 1397, when he was forced to do so by a decision of the provincial court. Only a ruin now remains of the castle in the midst of residential development. Uschitz. The first written mention of Uschitz in Kingdom Come Deliverance dates to 1284. Until 1552, ownership of this small town was a split between the lords of Talmberg and the lords of Rattay, who eventually became its sole owners. The medieval church of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, built in the 12th century, stands in the center of the village. Vranek. An early medieval hill fort, or gourd, first settled sometime around the 9th and 10th century. The northern side is protected by a steep slope leading down to the river and continuing north eastward in a narrow, rocky strip of land, which opens into a spacious headland formed by a meander of the river near Vlaki village. The hill fort is surrounded by a still visible, although in places strongly eroded, oval rampart. Meh. We'll save the events for last. I'm getting sleepy again. I've been streaming for like almost 3 hours. Ah! No! Oh, why? Why does I have to be so sleepy? Fuck. Well, we live in a society. I'm getting sleepy again, so I'm gonna be heading off. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed if you did, and hopefully you guys show up for part 3. Sorry that I couldn't last longer, but you know, I'm just getting sleepy. What can you do? Anyway, hope y'all have a good day. Bye, guys.